On a calm autumn morning, sunlight streamed through the thick glass windows of Portsville International Airport, where Dahlia Mackenzie stood in front of a flight information display. Around her, people bustled about, dragging suitcases, clutching tote bags, or traveling in groups, anxiously checking their tickets and hurrying off to their gates. Overhead, announcements blared continuously, blending with the echo of footsteps and the hum of quiet chatter. Dahlia smiled to herself. She had been on countless business trips during her consulting career, yet today she felt a touch of nerves. Perhaps it was because she was carrying with her a crucial presentation for Davenport, a major client considered a progressive icon in the fashion industry. Securing a contract with Davenport could be a game-changer for her consulting firm, and more importantly, it was an opportunity to prove her abilities to those who had doubted her, often due to her skin color. Glancing at her watch, Dahlia reminded herself to get through security quickly so she could reach her seat in good time. She had deliberately booked seat 14C, an aisle seat with extra legroom, to work comfortably on her laptop during the flight. Dahlia often experienced stiffness in her knees if she couldn't stretch out enough. Clad in a neat white blouse and a tailored navy suit, Dahlia looked professional yet warm. Her glossy black hair was braided elegantly around the back of her head. She walked with confident strides, though behind that confidence lay countless hours of effort and resilience. Portsville Airport was lively that morning, with passengers headed for a variety of destinations. Among the crowd, Dahlia briefly noticed a blonde-haired woman in her 40s wearing designer sunglasses even indoors, guiding a small girl around 8 or 9 years old. The child wore a light pink dress and clutched a stuffed rabbit tightly, looking shy as she kept close to her mother. Dahlia assumed they might be on the same morning flight. The woman looked rather stressed. Dahlia, however, had no reason to pay much attention at this point. She offered a polite smile in passing and continued on. Everything seemed ordinary until Dahlia cleared the security checkpoint. She wheeled her suitcase toward Gate B28, where her flight, PX 765 to Crescent City, would depart in 40 minutes. Little did she know that within a few hours, her name would be tied to a tense situation on board, a moment that would test prejudice, courage, and the basic principle of mutual respect. Portsville Airport was a sprawling, modern hub constructed mainly of steel and glass. Along the corridors leading to Gate B, enormous glass walls revealed aircraft parked side by side on the tarmac. Planes from various airlines displayed different logos, while ground crews hurriedly loaded luggage, checked engines, and prepared for the next journey. Near Gate B28, rows of gray leather seats stretched across a well-lit waiting area. On the high ceiling, strips of LED lights gave off a cool white glow. A few coffee stands stood around, their lines growing as passengers queued for a quick breakfast, muffins, croissants, or a cup of hot coffee. Nearby, self-service kiosks allowed travelers to print boarding passes or change seats. A voice from the PA system announced that Flight PX 765 would soon commence boarding. Dahlia inhaled a calming breath and sat on one of the seats, opening her laptop to review her final presentation slides. This presentation was on diversity and inclusion in the workplace, not just a theoretical talk for Dahlia, but a personal cause. She wanted to share her lived experience as a Black woman who had faced and overcome unspoken barriers in her corporate career. While Dahlia focused on her laptop, a tall, slim man with graying hair and a green jacket approached and sat down next to her. He smiled politely. "Good morning, I'm Jonas Flynn. Are you also on Flight PX 765? He asked. She looked up and returned his friendly smile. "Yes, I am. My name is Dahlia. Nice to meet you." Jonas dropped his briefcase at his feet and stretched. He casually mentioned the flight had been delayed, complaining mildly about the inconvenience. He explained that he was a retired economics professor visiting old friends in Crescent City and that he liked taking early flights to arrive in time for a small seminar later in the afternoon. Their brief chat was interrupted when Catherine Whitefield, the same blonde-haired woman Dahlia had noticed earlier, walked past, holding her phone close to her ear. Her voice sounded irritated. "Seriously? No window seat? My daughter needs a window or she gets anxious. Don't tell me there's no space left." Her voice, shrill and unhappy, caught the attention of passengers nearby, including Dahlia and Jonas. Dahlia returned to her slides, trying not to get involved in a private conversation. She felt a mild tension emanating from that woman and her young daughter, Lily, who clung to her mother with worried eyes. Another announcement rang out over the PA, summoning passengers for boarding at Gate B28. Dahlia closed her laptop, bid Jonas a quick goodbye, and headed into the line. The Pacific Air Boeing 737, painted white with a blue bird logo, welcomed passengers with the usual airplane sense of new seat covers, carpet flooring, and the crisp, cool air from overhead vents. Flight attendants in matching navy and purple uniforms stood by, greeting passengers as they filed in. Dahlia nodded politely as she passed the attendants and proceeded to row 14. She already knew the layout, a 3-3 arrangement with seats A, B, C on one side and D, E, F on the other, separated by an aisle. Seat 14C on the right side near the aisle was hers. She had paid extra for this extra legroom seat, essential for her to stretch her legs and work comfortably on her laptop during the flight. Dahlia also had a mild knee condition that made cramped seating painful over longer flights. As soon as Dahlia settled into seat 14C, she carefully placed her laptop on the tray table. She adjusted the headrest, checked the seatback pocket for any in-flight materials, and slipped off her heels to rest her feet. Suddenly, a woman's voice spoke from the aisle, firm but not loud. "Excuse me, could you take a different seat?" Dahlia looked up and recognized Catherine Whitefield and Lily. Catherine still wore her oversized designer sunglasses despite the dim cabin lighting, one hand resting protectively on Lily's shoulder. "Pardon me?" Dahlia asked, arching an eyebrow. "Yes, you," Catherine replied. "My daughter needs to sit by the window. She's very anxious about flying, and having a window helps calm her. I need you to move." Observing Lily's shy, anxious demeanor, Dahlia responded politely. "I'm sorry, but this is seat 14C, which I reserved and paid extra for. I really can't switch. I also need the legroom." Catherine pursed her lips, clearly taken aback that Dahlia didn't give in immediately. She lowered her voice yet kept a sharp tone. "You should understand how important this is for a child. My daughter will panic if she can't see outside. Surely your legs aren't more critical than her fear." In truth, Dahlia often compromised if someone asked politely, and it didn't inconvenience her too much. But this time, she had reasons. Her knee condition would flare up if confined to a tight space, and she had important work to finalize on this flight. She couldn't afford to be exhausted or in pain. Moreover, the woman's dismissive tone and the quick flick of her gaze at Dahlia's appearance, from her neatly braided hair to her professional outfit, Dahlia felt an undertone of condescension. She mustered a calm explanation. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Whitefield. As I said, I can't trade seats. You and your daughter have assigned seats, correct? Please take them." Catherine's face reddened. "Fine, I'll speak to a flight attendant." She stormed off with Lily scurrying behind her. Dahlia caught a faint mutter from Catherine. "So selfish. My poor child. So unfair." Dahlia's pulse raced. She tried to refocus on her slides, but her hands trembled slightly on the keyboard. She didn't want a viral confrontation, nor did she want to be forced out of a seat she'd rightfully paid for. She remembered the countless times her boundaries and rights had been brushed aside simply because she was expected to sacrifice and be helpful, perhaps more so due to her being a black woman. She closed her eyes briefly, telling herself, "Stay calm. Don't let this escalate if you can avoid it." Passengers continued boarding, wrestling luggage into overhead bins, adjusting seats, and greeting each other. Dahlia tried to review her slides again, but within minutes she heard the click of high-heeled shoes hurrying toward her. Looking up, she saw Catherine returning with a young flight attendant named Haley, according to her name tag. Before Haley could ask any questions, Catherine spoke first. "She won't switch seats for my daughter. My child has severe anxiety, and this airline should accommodate us." Haley, keeping her professional composure, offered a measured smile. "I see, ma'am. Let's clarify the situation. Could you please tell me your name?" "Catherine Whitefield," the woman replied sharply, chin jutted high. Haley checked her tablet. "And you, ma'am?" she asked, looking at Dahlia. "I'm Dahlia Mackenzie," Dahlia said quietly, holding up her boarding pass. Haley nodded and verified on her device. "Ms. Mackenzie, you're in seat 14C, correct?" "Yes, I paid extra for this seat." Turning to Catherine, Haley added, "Mrs. Whitefield, our records show you and your daughter are assigned to seats 22A and 22B. If your daughter needs a window seat, A is also a window seat. But row 22 doesn't recline and is right by the restroom, Catherine interrupted harshly. It's cramped. My daughter can't handle the smell or the noise. She's anxious. Doesn't this airline care about a child with special needs? Haley's smile didn't waver. I apologize, but if you required special accommodations, you would need to arrange that when booking so we could seat you appropriately. Ms. Mackenzie paid for this seat, so she isn't obligated to move. Dahlia could feel Catherine's hostility as the woman openly glared at her. Memories flashed through Dahlia's mind. Times she'd been forced aside or judged unfairly. Times she had to prove her worth when others were dismissed without question. Right now, though, she was determined to stand her ground. Catherine raised her voice so that other passengers started paying attention. This is unbelievable. You prioritize one paying customer over my child? She's anxious. Doesn't compassion matter here? Mrs. Whitefield, Haley interjected calmly, every passenger's comfort is important to us. But Ms. Mackenzie has the right to keep her seat. I can try to find another seat with a window for you, but Ms. Mackenzie doesn't have to be part of that solution. Catherine's face twisted in frustration as she glanced between Haley and Dahlia. Finally, with a visible clench of her jaw, she spat. Fine. We'll remember this airline's poor service next time. When Catherine and Lily stormed away, Haley turned to Dahlia. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, Ms. Mackenzie. Can I get you anything before we take off? No, thank you, Dahlia replied, relief washing over her. I appreciate your support. Haley nodded. Just doing my job. Every passenger should be able to fly without harassment. As Haley left, Dahlia exhaled slowly. She tried focusing on her laptop again, but her thoughts lingered on the incident. This sort of confrontation, while draining, was far from rare in her life. Still, she was grateful this time someone in authority had taken her side. The sight of Catherine pointing her finger and blaming Dahlia brought back an old memory from Dahlia's teenage years. She had once asked for an extension on an essay because she was juggling part-time work to help her mother. Instead of empathy, her teacher, who should have guided her, accused her of asking for special treatment. That moment stung deeply and remained with her, fueling her determination to work even harder. Over the years, Dahlia had learned to stifle anger, quietly excelling in both college and graduate school, earning scholarships and eventually landing a coveted spot as one of the youngest strategy consultants at her firm. Yet she was never entirely free of the sideways glances and the hushed remarks questioning if she was hired just for diversity. Now, strapped into seat 14C, Dahlia had a swirl of conflicted thoughts. Part of her empathized with Lily's plight. The girl looked genuinely anxious and might truly feel safer by the window. Could I manage in a standard seat for the sake of a frightened child? She wondered. But then, the reality. Her own mild knee condition, her important presentation, the money she'd spent on extra legroom. Why should she once again be expected to give up her comfort or her rights? I have the right to protect my well-being, she reminded herself firmly. Catherine's glare and scornful tone replayed in her mind, fueling Dahlia's resolution. She didn't want to be pushed around, especially not by someone who dismissed her so readily. The laptop open on the tray, Dahlia looked up again at the flurry of passengers. Her heart pounded, but her gaze was steady. She resolved she wouldn't budge. If Catherine needed a better seat, there were other options. Maybe someone else would agree, or she could ask the airline about alternative accommodations. But Dahlia would not yield her seat and compromise her comfort. She closed her eyes momentarily, whispering a silent mantra. Stay calm, do what you must. You have every right to be here. When Catherine left to speak with more airline staff, Jonas, the older man who had spoken with Dahlia in the waiting area, leaned over from the opposite row. He said gently, I'm so sorry you have to go through that. Are you all right? Dahlia offered a small, grateful smile. I'm fine. Thank you for asking. I respect your decision, Jonas nodded. You're not doing anything wrong. Everyone has their own needs. Dahlia felt warmth in her chest. She appreciated his silent support, even though he kept a low profile. Sometimes, a nod of understanding was enough to help her hold her ground. Taking a moment to collect herself, Dahlia opened her phone to check emails while there was still time. Her boss, Robert Vaughn, had sent a message reminding her of the upcoming presentation with Davenport. We're counting on you, Dahlia. Show them your passion for diversity and inclusion, it read. Reading his encouraging words gave Dahlia an extra push. She couldn't allow this plane drama to derail her composure or her preparation. Shortly after, another flight attendant, Lisa, announced that the flight would be delayed an additional 20 minutes due to technical issues. Passengers groaned and sighed. Dahlia thought, I arranged everything so carefully, and now more delays. About 10 minutes later, Catherine reappeared, looking angrier than before. Lily followed, clutching her stuffed bunny. Catherine confronted Haley again, raising her voice. Nobody will switch! So my daughter and I are stuck in that horrible row in the back? I won't accept this. Haley tried keeping the situation calm. I'm really sorry, but no one in an extra legroom seat has agreed to trade with you. If you don't want row 22, I can see if there's a standard window seat somewhere else. But that's not extra legroom, Catherine retorted. I need 14A or 14B because these rows have more space. My daughter can't be cramped. She's anxious. Haley pressed her lips together. I'm sorry, but those seats were purchased by other passengers. If they won't switch, there's nothing we can do. The confrontation pressed on, attracting more attention from nearby passengers. Dahlia felt her anger flare again, especially hearing Catherine dismiss her so harshly. She recalled how many times in the past she'd been expected to just move over. Enough was enough. Steadying her voice, Dahlia finally rose. Mrs. Whitefield, please stop pointing at me and speaking so disrespectfully. This is my assigned seat, which I paid for, and I'm not giving it up. Kindly stop repeating this demand. Catherine appeared stunned that Dahlia, a black woman she seemed to consider beneath her, was daring to speak so firmly. She sputtered, Oh, we'll see about this. Catherine turned back to Haley with fresh indignation. I want the head flight attendant now. I'll file a complaint. My daughter has a doctor's note for her anxiety. Who's responsible if she has a panic attack? Haley tried to reason with her. Certainly, Mrs. Whitefield. Please wait here. I'll call the purser. Moments later, Brenda, the senior cabin attendant, a middle-aged woman with auburn hair, arrived. She listened to Catherine's story about her anxious daughter needing a wide, reclining window seat. Dahlia watched Brenda consult her records, then speak in a cool yet firm tone. Mrs. Whitefield, please understand that we cannot force a passenger who has paid for an extra legroom seat to give it up. If your daughter has a medical condition, we're happy to assist, but you must inform us at booking. Our only option now is to move you to any open seats if you wish, but Ms. Mackenzie is within her rights to keep hers. Catherine's eyes burned with frustration. She ripped off her sunglasses, revealing green eyes brimming with anger. She fished out her phone as if threatening to record. Then she aimed a glare at Dahlia. If anything happens to my girl, you'll be responsible. Dahlia's pulse thundered. She wanted to shout, responsible for what? Sitting in my rightful seat? But she swallowed hard, trying not to inflame the situation further. As Catherine continued to fume at Brenda, Dahlia felt waves of fatigue from the mental strain. She had planned to use this flight to finish up her presentation and maybe catch a few minutes of peace. Instead, she found herself at the center of a heated dispute. She worried the stress might affect her performance at tomorrow's meeting. Given that the flight was already behind schedule, Dahlia mentally braced for possible further complications. At least Jonas offered a supportive smile. The presence of a quiet ally helped her not to feel entirely alone. Suddenly, a young woman, about 30 years old, seated in 15A, a standard window seat behind Dahlia, spoke up. Excuse me, I overheard your daughter needs a window. I'm happy to switch seats with her. Her name was Samantha, a solo traveler. While 15A was not an extra legroom seat, it was a window seat. Haley beamed with gratitude. Thank you, Samantha. Mrs. Whitefield, would you like to move to seat 15A so Lily can have a window seat? Catherine briefly glanced at 15A, but then she turned back with obvious displeasure. But that's not extra legroom, is it? My daughter needs more space to relax, and I also need to sit next to her, not behind or apart. 15A doesn't solve our problem. Her refusal deflated Samantha's generous attempt. Haley thanked Samantha anyway and relayed a final instruction for everyone to take their seats because departure was imminent. Catherine, however, continued huffing, refusing to budge from the aisle. Passengers now had trouble passing by to reach their rows. Brenda discreetly signaled for help. The tension in the cabin was palpable. Many murmured complaints about potential delays. In the swirl of chaos, Dahlia couldn't help but reflect on the content of her upcoming presentation. Diversity and inclusion are not just buzzwords. They're about respect, understanding, and an environment that feels safe for everyone. Ironically, she was now living out a real-life scenario underscoring how the concept can break down when individuals don't approach it in good faith. She told herself that being inclusive doesn't mean letting someone walk all over her. It also didn't mean ignoring her own legitimate needs or letting prejudice go unchecked. This is precisely the lesson she planned to share with Davenport. Real inclusion means everyone is heard and respected, rather than forcing one person to give in unconditionally. A middle-aged man, Michael, seated nearby, leaned over and quietly said to Dahlia, "Don't get discouraged. You're not in the wrong. My son has knee issues too, so I understand your situation." Dahlia smiled, grateful for his empathy. Even if such support was understated, it validated her stance. She was not being cruel, merely protecting her legitimate right to a seat she had purchased for a reason. Moments later, the pilot's voice came over the intercom, explaining that takeoff would be delayed an additional 15 minutes due to bad weather on the runway. Passengers groaned, some cursed under their breath. Dahlia sighed. She needed to arrive on time for a pre-meeting discussion. Every extra minute threatened her schedule. Suddenly, Catherine appeared from the rear aisle, her face blotchy from tears, Lily hugging her stuffed rabbit. She confronted Brenda and Haley. "We're getting off this plane. I won't subject my daughter to this misery any longer. This airline is terrible." Haley tried calming her. "Are you sure you want to deplane? Your ticket might not be refundable." "I don't care," Catherine barked, raising her voice. "I'll drive or catch another flight. I'm not putting my child through this anymore." Brenda cautioned, "If you leave now, we have to remove your checked luggage from the hold. That will take time." "Then do it," Catherine snapped, voice cracking. "Just get us off of here." The flight crew had little choice but to comply, notifying ground staff to unload Catherine's luggage. This meant additional delays for everyone on board. Frustration spread through the cabin. Some passengers muttered, "Oh no, more delays," while others sighed, "She's holding the entire flight hostage." Dahlia felt a mix of relief and regret. Relief because perhaps the dispute was over. Regret because Lily was still just a child who was obviously struggling. But Catherine's unyielding behavior and personal attacks had left Dahlia no choice. Just as it seemed Catherine's only option was to disembark, a sharply dressed man stepped out from business class. In his mid-30s, broad-shouldered, exuding confidence, he walked up to Brenda. His luggage name tag read, Daniel K. Harper. Speaking quietly to Brenda first, he then addressed Catherine. "Ma'am, I overheard your predicament. Your daughter needs more space and a window. I'm willing to switch my business class seat with you. It has a window, it's roomier, and it reclines. Would that help?" Catherine's jaw fell open. Lily stared, wide-eyed. Passengers around them were astonished. Business class was significantly more expensive. Catherine stammered, Are you serious? Why would you do that?" Daniel smiled modestly. "I was upgraded using my frequent flyer miles. I don't mind going back to economy for this short flight if it helps your daughter feel safer." Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mom, I want the wide seat." Everyone realized this was an incredible offer that gave Catherine exactly what she wanted: ample space, a window, and the chance to sit with Lily. Though Catherine still seemed tense, she conceded, "Fine, I accept, thank you." With that, Daniel nodded at Brenda, who quickly got on the phone to cancel the baggage removal process. Staff retrieved Catherine's luggage from the tarmac to return it to the overhead bin. Though it was cumbersome, it ended the stalemate. Dahlia witnessed this turn of events with mingled relief and gratitude toward Daniel. At least now she could remain in 14C without further confrontation, and Lily would have the comfort she needed. Finally, about an hour behind schedule, the captain announced pushback from the gate. The plane taxied toward the runway. Dahlia settled in, adjusting her laptop bag. The uneasy conversation in row 14 was over. Catherine and Lily were now in business class, apparently satisfied. Next to Dahlia, in seats 14A and 14B, sat a cheerful young couple, Marcus and Eva, who had just boarded. They introduced themselves with easy smiles, and Dahlia politely responded. She hoped the rest of the flight would remain tranquil. While the plane's engines hummed, Dahlia briefly looked back toward the business class cabin. She spotted Catherine and Lily already in their new, wider seats. Lily had stopped crying, hugging her bunny while looking out the window with fascination. Catherine no longer seemed aggressive. She had what she wanted. Meanwhile, Daniel was settling into row 22, reading a book with no sign of regret. Jonas, across from Dahlia, nodded at her, silently cheering that the conflict was resolved. Dahlia gave a soft, relieved smile in return. As the jet climbed, the sky outside glowed a brilliant blue above the cloud layer. Dahlia leaned back, closing her eyes to take a moment. The episode with Catherine still weighed on her mind. A reminder of how prejudice and entitlement could rear up in the most mundane places. Like an airplane seat assignment. That said, she felt relieved. She'd asserted herself, protected her legitimate right, and avoided being drawn into a chaotic confrontation that might have escalated. She recalled her mother's words, Anita Mackenzie, a strong black woman who had raised Dahlia single-handedly, always saying, "Stand up for yourself when it's right, but don't let anger rule you." Marcus turned to his wife Eva, excitedly discussing Crescent City's attractions. He asked Dahlia, "Are you visiting Crescent for business or pleasure?" "Business," she answered with a smile. "I have an important meeting tomorrow." "Hope it goes well," Eva chimed in. Their friendly banter lightened the mood, letting Dahlia enjoy a fleeting sense of normalcy on the flight. About 30 minutes into the flight at cruising altitude, Dahlia heard commotion from business class. Haley and Brenda hurried forward. Another passenger called out, "Someone help! The little girl seems to be panicking." Dahlia's stomach clenched. Lily was in distress? Catherine's fearful voice followed. "My daughter can't breathe. She wants off this plane." Haley promptly used the PA to ask for any doctors or medical personnel on board. A woman named Dr. Rose, seated in economy, rushed to business class. Dahlia's heart pounded. Despite everything, she was worried for Lily. Though Dahlia couldn't hear details, she glimpsed Dr. Rose providing Lily with a paper bag to help regulate her breathing and encouraging her to stay calm. Catherine wept, hugging Lily. Gradually, Lily's distress subsided, apparently just a panic attack. Dr. Rose requested a cup of warm water and told Catherine that Lily was out of immediate danger, but should be watched carefully. Peering through the aisle, Dahlia saw Catherine holding Lily, tears staining her cheeks. In that instant, Catherine no longer seemed hostile, just a terrified mother. Despite their earlier confrontation, Dahlia felt compassion for the girl, who truly struggled with severe anxiety. Even so, Dahlia thought, I don't regret standing my ground. It's unfortunate how it all unfolded, but at least Lily is okay now. Brenda made an announcement that Lily was stable and there was no need for an emergency landing. Passengers applauded in relief, the tension throughout the cabin easing significantly. Once calm was restored, Jonas leaned over the aisle to speak with Dahlia again. You see how life throws us into these moral quandaries sometimes? The way you handled yourself was admirable. Dahlia shrugged modestly. Thank you, though I was plenty angry and worried. He nodded. I used to be a sociology professor, so I understand how complicated human behavior is. Mrs. Whitefield clearly overreacted, but I'm sure it all stems from fear for her daughter. Dahlia sighed. Yes, but it doesn't excuse her blaming others. Still, I hope Lily won't be too traumatized by all of this. Jonas nodded in agreement, adding softly, and at least there are people out there willing to help, like Daniel. They exchanged a sympathetic smile. Dahlia felt a measure of peace knowing someone saw the entire situation with nuance. Sunlight glistened across the wing as the plane soared above the clouds. Occasionally, mild turbulence shook the cabin, but mostly, passengers relaxed into their seats. Dahlia reopened her laptop to finalize bullet points for the meeting. Corporate culture, mitigating unconscious bias, encouraging empathy. She thought, I just lived through an example of what I'll preach tomorrow. Inclusion doesn't mean forcing one side to yield. We have to find mutual solutions, as Daniel demonstrated. The seat-back display showed 2 more hours to land. Dahlia remembered her promise to call her mother upon arrival, a promise that also involved celebrating her mother's birthday dinner the following evening. Her mother couldn't wait to see Dahlia again after her business trip. Glancing at her watch, Dahlia hoped the delay wouldn't push her schedule too late. She wanted to surprise her mom by returning in time for the birthday celebration. Thinking of home, Dahlia felt a tug of emotion. She came from a modest background, her mother Anita having worked in sanitation for years to support them. Yet Anita showered Dahlia with limitless love, fueling Dahlia's ambition and resilience in a corporate world often fraught with unspoken bias. Refocusing on her slides, Dahlia carefully planned how she would present to Davenport's senior leadership. She understood the subject matter deeply and yearned to convey an authentic message. Diversity isn't window dressing, it's vital for long-term success. In her mind, she jotted, "I'm living proof. This flight itself has shown me again why it matters." After nearly 3 hours, the captain announced the plane's descent. Passengers began tidying their trays, shifting in seats and checking seat belts. Dahlia felt relief that she was about to land. She closed her laptop and packed it, ready to disembark quickly for a planned meeting. Catherine and Lily still appeared calm up front in business class. Daniel was likely finishing his book in row 22. Dahlia glanced at the seatback monitor. Less than 20 minutes to touchdown. Without warning, the sky grew dark. Fierce winds caused the aircraft to jolt. The fasten seatbelt sign dinged. Over the PA, the pilot instructed everyone to remain seated. Anxiety rippled through the cabin. Some passengers gasped with each bump. This turbulence felt stronger than normal. Dahlia's heart thudded. She grasped the armrests. "Really?" she thought. "This flight can't catch a break." For those tense moments, everyone, regardless of background or seat, shared the same fear. Catherine's cries rose from the front, possibly trying to reassure Lily. Flight attendants, including Haley, calmly repeated instructions, praising the pilot's skill. Jonas gave Dahlia an encouraging smile, a silent, "We're all in this together." After 10 minutes of heavy turbulence, the captain managed to stabilize the aircraft, finding a safer corridor. The wheels touched down on the runway with a loud thud. Cheering and applause broke out around the cabin. Dahlia exhaled deeply, thankful the plane was on solid ground at last. As the doors opened, people stood to collect their carry-ons. Dahlia waited patiently, not wanting to jostle through the crowd. She spotted Catherine and Lily exiting first, led by flight attendants to possibly meet airport staff for Lily's well-being check. Just outside the aircraft door, Daniel was rearranging his luggage. Dahlia approached, extending her hand. "Thank you for your generosity. You really helped resolve a major conflict." Daniel gave a modest nod. "No trouble at all. I didn't mind taking an economy seat to help a little girl feel safer. I just hope they're both okay." Dahlia noticed Catherine lingering near the jet bridge, cradling Lily in her arms. The mother locked eyes with Dahlia for a split second. Her face was puffy from crying, yet her gaze lacked the earlier hostility. Her lips parted as if to speak, then closed. Lily glanced at Dahlia meekly, her eyes tired. Dahlia hesitated. She simply offered a small nod, an unspoken courtesy, then moved on. There was no apology, no thank you, yet that was enough. She didn't need Catherine's gratitude or remorse. "At least we're both off the plane safely, and Lily seems all right," Dahlia reassured herself. Once she retrieved her checked luggage, Dahlia hurried to the arrivals area, pulled out her phone, and called her boss, Robert Vaughn. She quickly summarized the flight delay and confirmed she would reach her hotel within 45 minutes. Robert told her to rest and reminded her that the meeting with Davenport would begin at 3:00 p.m. the next day, giving her ample time to recover. Dahlia also said goodbye to Jonas and waved at Daniel. Both responded with warm smiles and words of encouragement. She stepped through the sliding glass doors into Crescent City's arrivals curb, inhaling a somewhat damp but refreshingly cool breeze. The sky remained gray, remnants of the earlier storm drifting away. Despite the day's tribulations, she felt thankful she could now refocus on her presentation. Chapter 20. Lessons and an Open-Ended Finish. 20.1. A Successful Presentation. The next day, Dahlia arrived at Davenport's impressive headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and steel. She wore a sharp gray business dress accented with a bright scarf featuring African-inspired patterns, a nod to her heritage. In front of Davenport's senior executives, she delivered a captivating presentation on building a diverse and inclusive workplace. She emphasized genuine listening, fair opportunity, and the need to address bias. Her real-life experiences, along with industry data, struck a chord with the audience. When she finished, Davenport's CEO stood to shake Dahlia's hand, expressing genuine interest in a long-term partnership. Dahlia's heart soared. Soon after her meeting, Dahlia caught an early flight home, on time thankfully, to celebrate her mother's birthday. Entering her childhood home, Anita greeted Dahlia with tears of joy, pulling her into a tight hug. Surrounded by relatives, Dahlia lifted a small glass of sparkling juice in celebration. Anita beamed. "My daughter's doing great things now, but always stay true to yourself, dear." Dahlia squeezed her mother's hand. "I'll never forget your advice, Mom. Be kind, but never lose your own worth." In her room later that night, Dahlia looked at a simple birthday card her mother had given her, decorated with a painted sky. Inside, her mother had written, "You deserve the best life has to offer." Dahlia couldn't help thinking of Flight PX 765, the mother's desperation, the child's fear, Daniel's kindness, and Jonas's quiet empathy. The entire episode showed her the two sides of humanity. Prejudice and entitlement could emerge at any moment, but so could generosity and moral courage. Dahlia smiled at the memory. The plane trip, though brief, had reaffirmed a core truth. To build a truly inclusive world, we can't demand one person constantly sacrifice. We must search for mutual understanding, respect, and fair solutions. With that lesson close to her heart, Dahlia felt confident and hopeful. She had not only won a big contract, she'd gained a deeper insight into compassion, self-respect, and the power of standing one's ground for the right reasons, an insight she would carry throughout her life.